After Virtue, chapter 15, we are living in the modern world, and thus we live fragmented lives. Our identities are fragmented. We lack unity and coherence, so argues Alistair McIntyre. Let me give an example. Take a typical adult. We will call him Frank. Frank is a middle-aged banker who lives in the suburbs of Philadelphia with his wife and children. Frank is also a Christian. So Frank goes to church every Sunday. There he worships a transcendent God and spirit and truth. Let's just say let's make Frank a Catholic, okay? So every Sunday he takes the communion. And 1 second. So every Sunday Frank takes communion. And he believes that he is ingesting the real body and blood of Christ. Now, Frank is not stupid or crazy or superstitious. He believes the accidents of the Eucharist taste, smell, and feel like bread and wine. However, the essence is a body and blood of Christ. He thinks in the Vercillian categories. But then Frank goes to work as a banker Monday through Friday. He deals with numbers and interest rates. On Sunday, Frank deals with the world of metaphysics and an encounter with a supernatural deity. He worships and celebrates a deity. It is a supernatural world. It's not a natural world. This is metaphysical, not physical. Monday through Friday, he deals in the strictly empirical world of numbers. That metaphysical and supernatural on Sunday does not apply to his work week. If it did, he'd probably get fired. Now, Frank lives in the suburbs. He and his wife have a private life. They are friendly with their neighbors. They wave at each other on occasion when they see each other, but the details of their family life is private, not in some scandalous way, just in a typical way that all our private lives are private. And the details of his neighbors' lives are private. They all put on the socially appropriate public face. But what's going in their homes? Are they verging on a divorce? Is there marital strife? Are the kids having problems? Are the cousins somewhere far away going through awful situations? Maybe, maybe not. But they don't really know each other, so they don't know. It's not lying or deception. It's people putting on socially appropriate public modes of behavior. It may be considered rude or socially inappropriate to air one's dirty laundry. The public and private divide is a matter of etiquette. They're all playing their socially appropriate roles in bourgeois suburban life. This is a matter of manners. It's not lying or deception. It's just, or it could be, I suppose, but it's just a matter of how one behaves in the suburbs or in middle-class life. The point of the matter is that we are all fractured beings. Our modern world forces us to have fractured identity. There's your private life, your public life. There's your professional life. There's your religious life. And as Frank navigates these worlds, he's literally stepping from church to work, from home to the public, back to home again. He has to become a different person, play by different rules, play by different metaphysics or no metaphysics at all, instantly shifting gears. We are so used to this kind of shifting of our gears that it's natural to us, yet that's not how it always was. In fact, for the majority of human history, that's not how it was. We had an integrated life. We lack, literally, integrity. So how do we reintegrate our lives, our beings, our identity? McIntyre in this chapter offers the idea of narrative. Our lives are narratives. Narratives makes our lives intelligible. Let's begin with the alternative. Imagine no narrative. Narratives are only fictions that exist in books. Any belief that your life is a narrative is a delusion that we impose on our meaningless lives. The idea of any narrative is a construction. Our lives are not narratives. This is actually what the existentialists argued. Your life is just a series of random and disconnected events. They don't cohere in any meaningful way. They don't cohere at all. There is no meaning. Meaning is something we made up to make our lives tolerable. They don't add up to anything, and any meaning or narrative is just what we imagine, construct, and impose upon the narrative of random decisions and things and happenings of our lives. It's random. Nothing holds together with any meaning. Okay, things just happen one after the other, and there's no reason why. It's just a sequence of events that happen. However, McIntyre argues that we only get meaning from narrative. That first of all, narrative is real, but we only get meaning from narrative. Otherwise, there's no comprehension whatsoever. Narratives make things intelligible. if one were to rip out a random page of a really grand, massive book, like on the Lord of the Rings, just go to page randomly 385, rip out a page and just rip out and just pick one sentence of that random page, and you just read that one line, and you didn't know anything about the book, it might be a perfectly grammatically correct, clearly written sentence, but you would not know what it meant. It does not function of your lack of intelligence, your lack of reading comprehension. It would be literally, the word would be unintelligible. It is a narrative and the context and the stream of sequential events, the one sentence after another, that makes anything intelligible. MacIntyre brings up this funny little imaginary anecdote of someone blurting out some random fact at a bus stop. Now, the fact is something about some animal species, but then someone just blurts it out. The fact is actually accurate, okay? And we all understand English. We know what the sentence means, but it literally does not make any sense without narrative or context. Think about the way conversations go. One person talks, there's a logical flow to the way a conversation goes. If there's someone who just says something that completely is out of the blue, you can understand the words, but it makes no sense. Now, what do we do with this random, factually accurate sentence? And then if you found out, he brings up the point, like if you found out that later on the man was a spy, and the fact that he blurted out was a password, and then actually the statement makes perfect sense. Or if he mistook you for someone who asked him a question about the fact and he answered, but he actually told the wrong person. Well, that makes sense, okay? It's narrative that makes sentences or any fact make sense. I mean, likewise, every event in our lives makes sense when we see them as responses and continuations to previous events and actions and decisions. In fact, he goes on to say, the more narrative we get, the more meaning we see, the more intelligible things become. More narrative means more meaning. So example, if you just took that one sentence of the Lord of the Rings, right, but add the whole paragraph, it will make more sense. Well, why don't you just add the entire chapter? Well, then that one sentence makes more sense. Well, why don't you add the entire, the Two Towers? Okay, then add all three books together. Then that one sentence in the middle makes more sense. Well, then add the Silmarillion, right? Then it makes even more sense. Add the Lost Tales. Add the entire life and context of Tolkien and World War I and his life and the Inklings, and all that helps make that one little sentence make more sense. Some narrative, good. More narrative, better. A lot of narrative, even better, in the terms of making things intelligible, in terms of making things have meaning. And your life, the things happening in your life, they are meaningful to the extent they understand that it is part of your grander narrative. The year of your life, this year of COVID, for example, or something happened in your sophomore year, that makes more sense when you put it in the broader context of the narrative of your life. And you know what, though? It's not just your life. It's you inherit the life to some extent that your parents gave you. Your life makes more sense than the narrative of your parents. And the life of your parents makes more narrative sense in the light of your grandparents. I mean, it's interesting. I'm getting older, and I think about the weird things in my life, and I think about what my father went through. Well, that makes more sense. And the more I understand what my father went through, I understand what he went through, and what his grandparents, there's a longer history, and we're not born into the world tabula rasa. We're not just born into the world ready to make our lives what we want to be, but rather we pick up where the life that we were given left off. That we have freedom, we have choices, we can make it something else, but we are given a set of cards that we must deal with. And those narratives make our lives make sense in a year-by-year basis when you're in life, but also the lives of those around you have led you to where you are. And furthermore, we don't function alone. Our narratives braid and interact with other narratives. You're not living alone in a bubble. Your narrative interacts with other people's narrative. It bumps against them, it braids together, it weaves together. And our individual narratives are part of a larger and grander tapestry, a larger, grander narrative of a tribe, a society, a nation, a culture, a family. The broader our understanding of our narrative goes in terms of how wide it goes, how much is part of a grander team, a family, a culture, the more meaning we can find it, the more intelligible it all becomes. So I want you to think of multiple dimensions. Our narratives make more sense in terms of time, go backwards in time. But our narratives make more sense in terms of wideness, how it interacts with other people's narratives, the people you bump into, the people you know indirectly, and the people you don't even know at all, right? So there's a geographical spread and also a temporal spread. The broader it goes geographically and the broader it grows temporally, in terms of time, the more our narratives make sense. And they're all weaving together rather than just random events that the existentialists would argue. Just stuff just happens. It doesn't mean anything. So what does this have to do with virtue? Well, think of your entire life as a unitary narrative. And the narrative is directed towards a singular goal, the telos. And virtue are the practices and habits that one embodies and takes on that enable one to move towards the good, to cultivate the eternal goods. And in order to make the various goods of our lives move towards the greatest good of all. Now, MacIntyre brings up the matter of the tragic and impossible conflicts that we encounter in chapter number 2, for example. Or what do you do when you're caught in a dilemma, an impossible dilemma? Something as simple as this. What if I'm a leader? If I choose option A, some will prosper and some will suffer. If I choose option B, others will prosper and others will suffer. No matter what options I have, someone's going to suffer. Some people will suffer and some will prosper. It would be nice if there was an option Z where we all prosper, but option D doesn't exist. Okay, there's going to be some situation here where some will prosper, some will suffer. Now, you could take a utilitarian approach where you just say, well, I mean, I'm going to put a numerical value in all the prospering and suffering and, even it out for the greatest good for the greatest number. We've already discussed how that's just garbage. It doesn't work that way. You can't actually put a number on people and try to come up with some equation. It just doesn't work that way. Or, what if just get more specific? What if I'm a leader and I'm being attacked by a hostile enemy nation? I've tried to negotiate with them, but it's not really working. If I go to war, many of my people will die and suffer. But if I don't go to war, many of my people will die and suffer at the hands of an aggressive enemy. So what is a leader to do? There's no real clear-cut answer here. It's hard. This is a complicated situation. And the only way to even approach an answer is virtue and an understanding of narrative. As an individual, you are heading towards the good. And you're doing your best to bring your people towards the good. This takes wisdom, though. And where does wisdom come from? Where does wisdom and how to seek the virtue, or what is the best for everyone? But all this presupposes that there is something called the good, that there's a telos. There's something called human nature, that we value human life. Remember before I talked about how sometimes virtue requires some kind of improvisation. The violinist, for example, right? I mean, there's some new techniques you got to develop to figure out, but that's in dialogue with the past and dialogue with other masters. That's virtue and that's wisdom. How does a leader make the best sort of decision? Well, he's not going to just make stuff up. He's going to have to be in dialogue with other virtuous, thoughtful people, but also consult the history, the past, or consult your narrative to figure out how we're all moving together towards a greater good. But once again, it presupposes that we collectively believe that there's a narrative anyway, that there's a common telos, that there's something called human nature, that we value human life. These are common assumptions you have to have. But in our present moment, our culture does not have this common understanding, or the common understanding we have tends to be one of individualism, autonomy, and possessive locking individualism. We all seek our own individual good, and we all have the liberty to make up our own decision about what is best for me, but not best for thee. We don't have a common narrative and a common telos. We don't have that. What we have are disconnected individuals living their own random lives. And there's certain liberty in that, but there's a limitation with that liberty. And that's where we are right now, kind of in an impoverished state. Liberty has some benefits, autonomy has benefits, but it has consequences as well.